Fiercely the storm raged. The rain fell in torrents. The trees were lashed by the fury of the elements. The thunder crashed and roared. But within the softly lighted library, silence reigned. Presently, the door opened, and Evelyn DeVere tripped into the room. Gracefully sinking into a chair, she was soon engrossed in the latest novel of the day. Footsteps were heard. There was a knock on the door. Tossing her book aside, Evelyn sprang to meet the newcomer. But disappointment was written plainly on her face. When Herbert Vanderslice stepped over the threshold, although it was not he whom she had expected, she greeted him pleasantly.
Hi, Herbert.
The young Vanderslice's nervousness was evident. He paced the floor rapidly for a moment, then dropped on his knees at Evelyn's side and clasped his hand in his, cried, "Evelyn, pride of my heart, I love you."
Evelyn, pride of my heart, I love you.
I cannot live without you.
I cannot.
Say that you will be mine
Say that you would be mine,
and make me the happiest man in the world.
and make me the happiest man in the world.
Evelyn answered, "Herbert, I cannot.
I cannot.
I am sorry for your sake that it cannot be.
I am sorry for your sake that it cannot be.
But I do not love you."
I do not love you.
Withdrawing her hand from his, she walked over to the table and gazed lovingly at the framed photograph there. Springing to his feet, Herbert cried, "Aha, I see it all now.
Aha, I see it all now.
You love Ralph Grayson,
You love Ralph Grayson,
but I swear it now you shall never be his."
but I swear it now, you shall never be his.
Evelyn was greatly frightened by his manner, and her tears fell fast. Herbert, turning, saw Mrs. DeVere standing in the doorway. Giving him a look of scorn, she swept into the room. "So, you would threaten my child, you cad, you scoundrel?"
So, you would threaten my child? You can, you scoundrel!
"Leave this house and never darken our doors again."
Leave this house and never darken our doors again!
Bewildered at her great wrath, he stood nailed to the spot. Time passed rapidly. Still, he did not move. Then Evelyn, with never a glance in his direction, took her mother's arm and left the room. "Go," said Mrs. DeVere.
Go, said Mrs. DeVere.
Herbert attempted to speak, but she silenced him with a gesture. Just then, the clock struck. Vanderslice staggered through the doorway. Weeks flew by. It was a beautiful night. The moon rose, and its silvery beams played about the room. Mrs. DeVere was sitting in the library doing a dainty bit of punch work, the picture of placid industry, when a hearty laugh was heard, and Ralph Grayson strolled into the room. Dropping her work with a glad cry of welcome, she rose to meet him with outstretched arms. "Ralph, my dear boy!
Ralph, my dear boy!
I am so glad to see you.
So glad to see you.
We've missed you during your travels."
We have missed you during your travels.
Mrs. DeVere pointed to the conservatory and smiling said, "You will find her there."
You will find her there.
Evelyn's mother, memories crowding, sat thoughtfully, but was startled by the sounds of someone creeping into the room. Startled to see that it was Herbert Vanderslice, she rose from her chair and, drawing herself to her full majestic height, said in a haughty manner, "To what do I owe this unexpected intrusion?
To what do I owe this unexpected intrusion?
Have I not forbidden you in the house?"
Have I not forbidden you in this house?
Herbert responded, "Mrs. DeVere,
Mrs. DeVere,
I must and shall see Evelyn."
I must and shall see Evelyn.
Just then the door opened, and Evelyn and Ralph danced gaily in, smiling and happy. When Evelyn saw Herbert there, she turned a little pale. "Did you wish to see me?" she said.
Do you wish to see me?
In the midst of the warmth and light, he shivered, chilled by the frosty tones of her voice, then frowned blackly, and striding toward her, attempted to pass Ralph. But Ralph quickly stepped forward and placed himself as a barrier between them, while Mrs. DeVere whisked her daughter from the room. Herbert, in his great anger, strode back and forth, tearing his hair. The room seemed intensely hot, and the temperature rose rapidly. Evelyn, watching the scene from the doorway, caught her breath with fear. Ralph emitted a low whistle as he gazed upon the insane fury of Herbert. Then, hoping to soothe the man, placed his hand on his shoulder. But Herbert turned upon Ralph suddenly, and the two assaulted each other. Evelyn stood chained to the spot, watching the terrific combat. But finally, as Herbert knocked Ralph to the floor, Evelyn, with a piercing scream, ran to Ralph and fell fainting at his feet. Mrs. DeVere grabbed Herbert. And they tenderly placed Evelyn in the chair. Evelyn revived and yelled, "You cad! If you cared about me at all, you wouldn't have done that."
You cad! If you loved me at all, you wouldn't have done that!
Apologetically, Herbert helped Ralph rise from the floor and stood quiet and subdued. Mrs. DeVere glared at Herbert and said, "Now, young man, the tables are turned."
Now, young man, the tables are turned.
Ralph walked to Herbert and said, "Vanderslice, you may have won this fight, but I have won Evelyn."
Vanderslice, you may have won that fight, but I have won Evelyn.
"Will you still wish us well?"
Won't you still wish us well?
Herbert stood motionless for a moment, then slowly extended his hand, which Ralph clasped with a hearty shake. Walking to Evelyn, Herbert took her hand, pressed it tenderly, and then, with his face drawn with pain, walked haltingly from the room. Ralph held out his arms and Evelyn ran into them. Mrs. DeVere laughingly gathered both in her embrace, and the lovers strolled to the conservatory. Mrs. DeVere resumed her dainty work, but affected by the peace and quiet, soon dropped into a gentle slumber. The clock ticked on. The lamp went out. The end.
Diane always has some really neat skits, does a good job. Well, we've come to the end of another variety show. I want to thank everybody in this room, the helpers, Gene on sound, the performers, and all of you people here, because if all of you